Welcome to Lesson 9, Why Validate? In this lesson we are going to be looking at why should we validate, what are the limits of validation, and what do the regulations require in terms of validation. What if this was your daily work? To wash all of these dishes, you can see they've all got different types of debris on them. But the good news is that funds were allocated for a new dishwasher. The only thing is, you must validate it first. What are the things you might consider? So first thing you're going to look at is the User Requirements Specification, or the URS. What functionality do I need the dishwasher to have? So what size does it need to be? How much wear does it need to be able to hold? Do you want to have a time delay on it? Do you need how many cycles do you want? Do you need delicate cycles? What's your water throughput, etc. The second part of the project would be your site acceptance test, your SAT. So once you get the dishwasher in, how do you check that all the parts of the functionality are what the shop promised to be? Have you got a checklist for that? Did you get the right functions as per the spec in the shop? And are all the parts present? And is the manual present? The installation qualification then, or the IQ, how do you make sure that it's fitted correctly? Attached to the proper water supply, attached to the proper waste, and attached to the electricity. The operational qualification then, how do I know that it's operating properly, that it's working correctly? So things you might be interested in here is the water pressure okay? Is the dispenser working? And is the waste going out correctly? And is the wash cycle the right length? Am I getting any errors when I'm operating it on an empty cycle? The performance qualification then, when it comes to how does it actually work in practice? When I put my ware into it, how do I know that it's going to wash my utensils correctly? How much detergent should I be putting in? Where would I load the different parts of the washer, etc.? So how does it work when you're performing it? When the dishes come out of it, are they all clean? Is there any water stains on them? Things like that. So that's your performance qualification. Why must I validate? Well, the number one reason that we validate is to protect the patient. Most importantly, it gives a high level of assurance that the product will be fit for its intended. Number two, it's mandated by the regulations. Number three, it helps to reduce the cost of quality, because when you go through the validation cycle, you get more product knowledge and more process knowledge, so you know more about your system and how it's working, and that leads to less downtimes overall. So the process optimization, through the studies that you do, you're going to inevitably end up having efficiencies, and less processing downtime increases your process efficiency, increases your process knowledge, so it's a win-win for everybody. The limitations then of validation. Well, first of all, the cost of it. It's very expensive to do. Secondly, you might have inadequacies in your facilities, in your equipment, systems, or procedures and training. You can have issues there with the actual ability of any of those things to perform to the level that you want them to, and that can make your validation suboptimal. People. Manual aspects to a process you can never fully validate for, so there's always a human factor, both in terms of performing your actual validation, but also in the general operation of your equipment subsequent to that. So that's where training, education, and experience are really important, that you have the right people and you train them correctly. These are some of the terms that you might be familiar with from validation terminology. I'd like you just to pause the presentation there for a minute and see how many of them that you're able to identify. So FAT, your factory acceptance test. FS, functional specification. HVAC stands for heating, ventilation and air conditioning systems. Your IQ is your installation qualification. OQ, your operational qualification. PQ, performance qualification. SAT, site acceptance test. SCADA is your supervisory control and data acquisition. C&Q you'll often heard referred to as commissioning and qualification. The URS is the user requirement specification. The VMP is your validation master plan, the overriding document that covers how validation is conducted on a site and what needs to be done. The VP, sometimes called the validation plan. The VR, sometimes called the validation report. FMECA, the failure mode effects and criticality analysis. We'll be talking about that in a further lesson. The FTA, the fault tree analysis, again coming up in a lesson down the line, and has up the hazard and operability study. And then CQA, which you will come across shortly. They are the critical quality attributes, and they're really important to understand. We'll be talking about those again. Why do we validate? Well, number one, process validation is a requirement of the current good manufacturing practices. So it's in the CFRs, 21 Part 10, Part 11. It's in the ICH guidelines, and it's also in the EUDRELEX and the European regulations. This is one of the areas that it's mentioned in the CFRs. So we have 211 subpart 110. So sampling and testing of in-process material and drug products. To assure that the batch uniformity and the integrity of the drug products, written procedures have to be established and followed that describe the in-process controls and the tests or the examinations to be conducted on appropriate samples of in-process materials of each batch. So what are you doing? What tests are you doing? What inspections are you making? What examinations do you perform to make sure that the in-process controls are at the level that you're expecting them to be throughout the process? So the next part of that is such control procedures shall be established to monitor the output and to validate the performance of those manufacturing processes that may be responsible for causing variability. So you need to be in control of the things that can cause variability. The more knowledge you have about that, the more control you have over your process. So in the characteristics of the in-process material and the drug product, such control procedures shall include, but are not limited to, the following where appropriate. So these are the typical type of tests you would do. So you would the tablet or the capsule weight variation. So if you have a significant degree of weight variation between tablets or between capsules, you are going to obviously be having an issue somewhere along the lines with the amount of API that you have in your drug, and your content uniformity across your batch won't be good. The disintegration time is really important because that determines when and where in the body a drug is absorbed. So for specific drugs, they need to have a specific disintegration time. So if your tablet's compressed too hard, or there's not enough of the disintegrant excipient in it, you might have issues with your disintegration time. That would cause a problem. The adequacy of mixing to assure uniformity and homogeneity. So obviously one of the checks that you do is to make sure that your batch is uniform across the entire batch, and that's what your sampling will be checking. Your dissolution time and your rate, again, that's linked very closely with your disintegration time, how long it takes a tablet or a capsule to dissolve and what they're dissolving in. The clarity, the completeness, or the pH of a solution. So that can be another indicator of how your process is working too. The Food and Drug Administration have issued a guideline in general principles of process validation. So the newest one is from January 2011, and if you go to the appendices of this lesson plan, you'll see it will be attached to it. Acceptable elements of the process validation for preparation of human, animal drugs and medical devices. So this is a guideline versus a law. So they issue guidelines in addition to the CFRs to give you a good understanding of what their expectations are from the manufacturing sites. In terms of this one in particular is around process validation. So it's well worth having a read of it because there's a lot of very good information there. So why do we validate? Well, the FDA defines validation as the following. So process validation is establishing documented evidence. So the documented evidence is really important, which provides a high degree of assurance that a specified process will consistently produce a product meeting its predetermined specifications and quality characteristics. So overall, for a regulator coming in, they've got a document that tells them that you've checked, that you've got control of your process, and that you have a lot of assurance that what you're manufacturing is meeting the specs that it needs to be meeting and the quality characteristics. The PICS identifies validation as the following. So process validation is the means of ensuring and providing documentary evidence that processes within their specified design parameters are capable of repeatedly and reliably producing a finished product of the required quality. So they're quite similar in terms of what they're requiring. So why do we validate? Well, it's a quality assurance goal. The manufacture of products have to be fit for their intended use. And there's three basic principles behind that. So number one, quality, safety and effectiveness must be designed and built into the product. It's really hard to try and test it in, or to try and you're going to end up with a lot of waste materials and a lot of rejected product. You need to have it designed in up front so that you've got to maximize your process efficiency and minimize your waste and downtime. Quality cannot be inspected or tested into the finished product. It needs to be done ahead of time. Each steps of the manufacturing process must be controlled to maximize the probability that the finished product meets all the quality and the design specifications. Process validation is a key element in ensuring that these quality assurance goals are met. This is how we succeed in reducing the variability in our processes, by having a good process validation practices in place. So just to check your understanding, why do we need validation? What are the limits of validation? Thank you for your time and attention. We'll see you back for the next lesson.